Fantastic. Good to see everybody. Happy May. I'm really proud to be here again today for our 8th Impact Leaders Lab. As some of you all already know, this is a private community that I built out just to help a select group of you all as sustainability leaders and professionals to really accelerate how to attack your own challenges and solve problems and really just get better at doing our jobs, but learning from each other and sharing best practice. So when you become a member of the Impact Leaders Lab, you'll get access to this private online monthly, it's going to become bi-monthly event, where you'll get practical tips from world-class experts and CSOs and senior executives from brands like Amazon and Google, Cliff Bar, LinkedIn, MSCI, and more. So for those of you all that don't know me, I'm Shannon Howd, and I've been in sustainability now about 20 years. I have been a practitioner myself. I've been a recruiter for about 30 years. I've been a management consultant in sustainability, and about 15 years ago, I launched Walk of Life because I really wanted to be a career journey partner for those of you all that are out in the field making a difference and shaping the impact. So I support my clients on anything from getting promoted to overcoming imposter syndrome or even possibly making a big career change. And I leverage my ICF certification as an executive and leadership coach, as well as my network. I have a really lovely network of about 20,000 people on LinkedIn that I use to connect you all with each other and also to do some recruitment. I would welcome all of you all again to put anything into the chat that you want. I'm going to first interview Megan and introduce Megan and then interview her and hear her wisdom. And then you all can ask questions directly of her. Great. Welcome, Megan. Thank you so much for making time. I know everyone is so busy these days, so really appreciate you being here. I'll just introduce you briefly and then you can add to it if you'd like. Megan is Vice President of ESG at Cardinal Health and a renowned leader in sustainability with an impactful career spanning over 15 years at leading brands, including Campbell Soup Company, where she spent 5 years as Director and Senior Manager of CSR and Sustainability. And before Campbell Soup, she was Sustainability Manager for 5 years at VWR, which is part of Avantor, and was also in the healthcare sector. So Megan has actually done a lot in her 15 years. I've been following her career through most of that. And in summary, she's crafted and executed comprehensive sustainability strategies, which really have focused on operational efficiencies, public reporting, and end-of-life recycling solutions. And she also has her master's in environmental management from Duke University. So again, just pop your questions into the chat, and then at the end of the interview, I'll call on you and you can ask your questions to Megan directly. So welcome, Megan. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Shannon. I am so honored to be part of this group. So thank you for the invitation to join.
Great. So let's kick off with maybe just telling the group how you know me, how we know each other, what our history is. And then we can dive into more about your role.
Yeah, I would love to. So Shannon, you and I have known each other for years now. And I think we were first introduced through Dave Stangus, who was my boss at Campbell Soup Company. Dave was the Chief Sustainability Officer for much of the time that I was there. And I believe you and Dave probably go way, way back. I think we first met at a Sustainable Brands Conference in Detroit, if I'm remembering correctly. And, you know, Dave really felt like you were somebody that needed to be in my circle, and he was certainly right. You have provided, you know, great guidance and advice to me over the years. So certainly you are built to be a coach. And, you know, that has led us to be roommates now at GreenBiz. So I can always count on seeing you and being roomies together at GreenBiz each year, which is so fun. And, you know, that's always when we get to catch up and see how life is for one another, both personally and professionally. So it's, I've really appreciated our friendship and our professional relationship over the years, Shannon.
Oh, thank you, Megan. Yeah, Megan was just talking a little bit about how she has I shouldn't tell everyone this, should I, that she has a pool party every year, but it's the day after I leave the US from being there for 2 weeks. So I'm very disappointed. I'm like, okay, I'm booking it out for 2026.
Such
So
bad timing, I know.
no, we're
We'll do better next year.
yeah. Well, great. Well, let's get into the juice. So I hear over and over again from pretty much everyone that works in a sustainability role how one of the biggest challenges is influencing and herding cats, like leading without authority. And that these are kind of the most important skills. How do you overcome these challenges of getting people within the organization to do things that aren't their day job, and to get all of the senior leadership also driving this as an important, critical strategic agenda for the organization. Do you find that that's one of the skills that's most important or one of the hardest to kind of overcome when you're in a role like yours?
Absolutely. And one of my catchphrases that I say quite often, both inside the company and outside of the company, is that as an ESG practitioner, we own almost nothing, but we influence almost everything. And I think those of us who work in ESG feel that like deep in our soul, that we are expected to create change across these large organizations, but so much of that doesn't actually sit with our influence, within our authority. So in order to do that successfully, you need to figure out how to influence everybody, right? The senior leadership, the board, but middle management, all the way across and up and down the organization in order to be able to drive the change that we're all looking to see.
Yeah, that's a great summary. I love that phrase. It's almost like we should rename the article we're going to write around, you don't own anything, but you influence everything. And it's really true. I think today we were framing this around kind of 5 steps to build trust, which you were saying is the most important first kind of stage that drives ESG influence across the board in the C-suite. So yeah, I'd love just to hear what you see as the biggest challenges that you're facing or you've faced in terms of having to shift mindsets of the unconverted, especially at the senior level, and even in today's, relatively tight financial market and economy, where we're seeing a lot of sustainability teams being disbanded and, a lot of political unrest around terminology and all sorts of crazy things. So yeah, I'm just curious, what are your biggest challenges, first of all, and then we can talk about the solutions.
Yeah, sure. So it might be helpful also to provide a little bit of context that I've been at Cardinal Health for 2 years now. I am the senior most ESG person in the organization, but I have a lot of other folks higher up than me that are very supportive of this work. We have focused on setting up a really strong governance structure, which I know we'll talk more about, but that has been really helpful. But this has been new for the organization, right? And I often have found myself in positions where I am building, which is something that I really enjoy, building strategy, building the foundation of a program, building influence and embeddedness. So for me, what I have found to be, and Shannon, you just alluded to this, the most important thing, especially when you're in those early stages, is building trust with your leadership team. If you can't build trust, you are not going to shift mindsets. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, whether they believe in climate change or not. And I've been on both sides of it. If they trust you, if they trust that you have the business's interest at heart, it will be much easier for you to shift that mindset. A couple of things that I've seen where leadership hasn't, trusted folks is that they think that they're exaggerating impacts. When we think about greenwashing, I think that also can happen inside of an organization, not just outside of an organization. So really being clear on your messaging and focused on your messaging and not exaggerating for effect. Again, they want to feel that you have the business's best interests at heart. They want to make sure that you're approaching the work strategically. And I think sometimes there's this preconceived notion maybe that we have an agenda that we're trying to push. maybe at the expense of other business priorities, right? So really, again, making it clear that our agenda is to both do good for the world in hand with doing good for the business, and those two things can and should go together. The other challenge, I think, is really getting them to understand what the real and potential business impact is from ESG, impact and opportunity, the magnitude of that impact. Sometimes I'll be talking about, regulatory requirements that are coming our way or customer expectations. And I can kind of see it like going in one ear, out the other, because they've got a lot of things in their mind and a lot of things on their plate. So really helping them to understand how this is going to impact the business that you are in. And again, not exaggerating the impact, being honest about the impact, and really just, getting them to understand that this is real impact to the business. This isn't, we're not talking about being altruistic or philanthropic. We are talking about risk to the business, and we're talking about real business opportunity that we should be taking advantage of as a competitive advantage. And the final thing, and I think I just alluded to this, is that there are so many risks and topics to discuss with management all the time. So really figuring out how to focus your messaging. I have found that if you put too much in front of them at once, you will lose them. They are not experts in this. And I think if you start to get really technical or throw a lot of different topics at them at one time, again, it sort of starts to go in one ear and out the other. So really giving them bite-sized information, being strategic about how you're putting that information in front of them is really helpful.
That's kind of true for all audiences, isn't it? It's just
100%.
kind of keep it simple and drip feed it in rather than kind of going full throttle. And I bet that's hard when you're coming into a new organization and needing to build everything from scratch almost. You're needing, you're seeing there's so much opportunity. It's how to prioritize probably a bit too of which of those issues are the most business critical for you in that year, that moment. So yeah, there's a lot in there of what you've just uncovered. I'm just curious about, this word trust. I'm just going to go off track just for a second, because I think we talk about things like trust and buy-in, and it's kind of like, well, what are these things? Like, how do we know we've got them, right? And how do we know we have influenced successfully? Is it that so are there any kind of things that you've seen, Megan, in the last, let's say 2 years, where you're like, oh, I did it, I built the trust, or yeah, I did it, I influenced that person? What are the signs that you've done that piece?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first thing that comes to mind is having your CEO talk about this work unprompted, right? Unscripted. Being able to answer questions on it when I haven't prepped him for it. He's really listening, he's really absorbing, and he really trusts that what I've said is true enough that he's comfortable talking about it when he's not necessarily the expert in it, but he's comfortable to talk about it, and he trusts that what I've said should and can be shared with a larger audience, typically internally, but sometimes externally. So that's one example. I can tell you that I am very fortunate that we have a really wonderful board of directors, and we have a really wonderful management team at Cardinal Health. Our board of directors has said things like, we feel so relieved, or we're so happy that we have you and your team in place, right? So things like that are really important and really show that we've done a really good job of showing them that this work is critical for the business, and that what we do for the business really matters. And they are actively engaged in our committee conversations. And I present to the board every single quarter, to the governance and sustainability committee of the board. And we often go over time because they're asking so many questions. So they really want to learn, right? And I think that's also part of, it may not be as obvious, but if they trust what you're saying is true, then they want more of it. I think if they don't trust you, they sort of tune you out and move on. But they are so actively engaged in the conversation, which is great.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, yeah, it's interesting because then you have people that are already converted in a way and hungry for more information. And then you still have to know, well, okay, how do I keep building that momentum and trust and taking them almost to the next level of thinking strategically about these issues. So no, those are some great examples of what does it look like that you've done your job well. So what have you learned from these challenges of having to build something from scratch and build the trust and get the CEO talking about things comfortably and often? What are your top tips about what would those magic 5 steps be to earn this influence with senior stakeholders? I know you started talking about trust and exaggeration and messaging, but I'd love just to hear you frame it.
So like 5 top things that we need to focus on, or
yeah, you could say it that way, sure.
So I think, and I think about this, I think it's really important to be honest. And I know that might sound really simple, but I mentioned this earlier that I have seen folks exaggerate things or use absolute terms like all of our customers care about this. And I think when you are talking to a general employee population, they might buy that. But if you're talking to senior leaders of your organization, they're going to see right through that kind of thing. So I think you just need to be honest with your communication and your messaging. And again, don't exaggerate things. I often get questions like, is what you're saying a real risk or a potential risk? So they even want to know the difference there. Like, is this a risk we're feeling right now to the business, or are you saying this is a risk in the future? And what is the potential magnitude of that risk? So again, this field has gotten really mature really quickly, right? So our language needs to mature with it. It's almost like, we've all said, like, you've got to stop putting like globes and green leaves on our marketing material. Like, you've got to stop using these like general sustainability terms and images. And we've really got to get, like I said, we've got to mature the way we talk about it. Be confident and also humble would be the next one. So I often, you talked about imposter syndrome. When I'm like sitting in front of a board of directors who many of them have been CEOs of other companies and they have like unbelievable resumes, I'm definitely like, wow, I am super out of place here. But then ultimately I come back to, you know what? I know this material better than anybody else. I have expertise in this area. I'm going to be confident in that, but I'm also going to be humble that I don't know everything. And I'm going to be open to their questions, open to their corrections. And if I don't know an answer, I'm going to be honest about that as well, which I think is really important. Spend the time educating. So something I say is that I lay the breadcrumbs. So I have spent 2 years educating the leadership team and the board. I have not really made any sort of big ask of them yet. 2 years. My first big ask is coming next month when we put our climate action plan in front of our leadership team. But I have very like purposefully, intentionally spent those 2 years educating, repeat over and over the same messaging so that again, it absorbs, it sinks in. And I'm also, I put very concrete examples in front of them. So I will put customer contract language in front of them of what our customers are asking us to do around ESG. I will put the regulations and what the potential, financial impact might be from a penalty or a fine perspective. So I really tried to get very tangible with the examples that I put in front of them to show them what the potential impact to the business may be. Make the connections for them would be the 4th one. So don't assume that your leadership can make the connections themselves, because again, they are still in learning mode. And if you remember back to any time you are learning, oftentimes you need a teacher to make those connections for you. And so I think we need to think of ourselves as the teachers and help them make those connections, whether that's the connections between ESG and business or whatever it might be, right? So an example I have is a vice president in our IT organization reached out about a new regulation. and said, I wanted to make sure you were aware of this new regulatory requirement. I was really very happy that he proactively reached out to me about it. And I said, thank you so much for sharing this with me. We're on top of it. Just so you know, the new data reporting system that you helped us implement is actually going to help us meet the requirements of this new regulation. And his response was like, thank you so much for helping me make that connection. So again, I could have easily responded to that email like, thank you so much, period, send. But I wanted to take the extra step to show that the effort that his team actually put in to this project is going to help us meet that regulatory requirement that came up on his radar. And then the last one, number 5, would be reasonable in your asks and always tie it to the business. So I am really, I think, reasonable in thinking about where Cardinal Health is on our ESG journey right now. And so I have tried to be reasonable with the goals that we've proposed to the organization, the resources that we have as a team. And again, I always tie it back to the business. So, we always say like ESG has to act in service to the business, and that it can be the right thing to do and the right thing to do for the business. And so we've been really intentional in making those connections. So we are getting better at quantifying emissions reductions and cost savings, let's say for like a logistics project, for example, whereas before we might just be calculating cost savings. We're helping those teams to calculate emissions savings from those types of projects now as well. So we can bring that to the leadership team and to the board of directors and show that look at all these great business wins. They're actually also ESG wins as well. And the more that we can do that and share that with the organization, the more examples of those opportunities will come to us. I know that was a lot of information.
No,
Maybe
that
I can
was
sum it up. So
Yeah.
1 is be honest and don't exaggerate. 2 is be confident and also humble. 3 is spend the time educating. 4 is make the connections for them. And 5 is be reasonable in your asks and always tie it back to the business.
great. I think those are a fantastic list. I think that could be our new just like international framework for doing this job, to be honest. Like if we all do all of that, I think it'll be quite successful. I mean, you've talked a little bit about risk and opportunity. And again, we use those words a little bit, we overuse them, I think, in our space a little bit. I'm just curious in your sector or in your business, talk to us a little bit about how you and we're constantly tying it back to business, right? So what are the risks are kind of more, I think, more obvious, the regulatory or operational or reputational, but are there some other risks that don't fall into those that you see being able to help your business, again, to build this business case to do more on the ESG side of things? And then what kinds of opportunities do you bring to the table? Because it could be commercial or, it could be product, it could be so many different types of things. So could you just give us like maybe 2 or 3 examples of risk and opportunity that you've seen in your time at Cardinal?
Yeah. Well, any risk managed well becomes an opportunity, right? So you can see it from both angles. And so just a couple of examples. Well, I'll say first, when I frame this for the leadership team, I always frame it in terms of stakeholder groups. So I frame it as employees, customers, regulators, investors. That's always how I frame it. So I will talk about what are the, if we do this right, it will enable us to attract and retain top talent, right? And that's very compelling because we know that particularly younger generations want to work for companies whose values are aligned to their own. If we, on the customer piece, right, we are seeing customer expectations change quite quickly around environmentally preferable products or packaging or, sort of you name it, climate goals. And so again, if we are lagging in that area, there's risk there, right? With our customers, we want to, of course, retain customers that we have, and we want to attract new customers. And so if we do this well, we have the opportunity to differentiate ourselves a little bit in the market around products, around service offerings. So for example, we have a reprocessing service where we take back used medical devices, and we reprocess them and we resell them. And we've done a life cycle assessment on this and have shown that there is a 40% reduction in carbon footprint of a reprocessed device versus a single-use device. And it also saves hospital customers 90% on their waste disposal costs. So trying to put the metrics to the actions and really show our customers that there are sustainable offerings that we have that really make sense from an environmental perspective, and again, a business perspective, because it helps them save money. So let's see. Investors are investors, right? We're having these conversations. They're asking questions. They're asking less questions recently, but they're still engaged. They still want to understand what we're doing around, climate goals, science-based targets, et cetera. And then the regulatory piece, and I saw some questions coming through on the regulatory piece in the chat. This is huge right now, obviously. So Cardinal Health is a global company. We operate in like over 30 countries. We are in scope for many of the regulatory requirements coming our way. And if we are proactively managing this, it helps prevent risk, but also it helps prevent supply chain disruption potentially, right? It helps to prevent penalties and fines, and it enables us or ensures that we can get our product where it needs to go, right? Ultimately to the patients, without any delay or disruption at all.
Yeah, those are some really good, solid examples. I mean, I know that, I bet that, anyone can probably poke holes in any of these and say, oh, but, is this enough for us to act on it? So when you do have someone in the senior level, decision-making mode that hasn't bought into this or is the critical friend in this process, what is the one thing you would say you would do to get them to buy in? I know we talked about the trust to the influence and then the shifting mindsets, but is there like a magic wand that you can wave to get them to buy in?
I mean, I can tell you that this is not at Cardinal. And early in my career, I had a senior leader who was not bought into this work. This person was, didn't believe in human caused climate change, and said that, he said things like, I know this is what you believe because you read it in your books. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a difficult relationship. And we did a major lighting retrofit that year, and I put these savings numbers in front of the leadership team, and it's really hard to refute dollars saved, right? So ultimately, it didn't matter what this person's like personal beliefs were. It was impossible to say, well, this doesn't make business sense, because I was showing real cost savings month over month for this one facility. That's like a very discrete example, but it was, I think, one of the ways that I was able to get in with this individual, who then ended up over my, many years at this organization, becoming one of my biggest champions, actually. Because again, he understood that it helped the business. It helped us with customers and helped us drive down costs and operate more efficiently and remove waste. So again, it's just about, Jim Hartsfeld, who worked hand in hand with Ray Anderson at Interface Floor for years to build interfaces like the most ambitious, sustainability goals and objectives. He has talked about these like 100 doors into sustainability. And I always have that image in my head, right? Like everybody has a door that they're willing to open and walk through, but you have to find what's going to encourage them to open the door, right? You can't pull them through it. You have to entice them to open it themselves. And once they walk through, they're in, right? You've got them. But you have to spend the time and work on figuring out, like, what is it that's going to help them open that door? And sometimes they open that door really quickly, and sometimes it takes longer. I talk about it at Cardinal, like putting on your ESG glasses. And I've been wearing my glasses for 15 years. So I look at everything through ESG lenses, but you can't expect everybody to do that. They haven't built the muscle for that yet. So you've got to figure out how to help people build that muscle so that they can figure out how to put that ESG lens on their work.
Yeah, that's I love that image too. And the doors, we always say in recruitment, if the door is closed, go through the window. So for the candidates, one of my clients came up with that. Her dad's a recruiter, and I was like, I love that. It's the same thing though, right? It's the same
Yeah.
concept. You just keep so you can figure out what is that door that's going to open for them and what matters to them, and trying to reach them through that empathy lens of what is the most important thing for them. And then you can layer in that ESG lens in their language and via their perspective to reach them. Can you tell me again the name of the guy that came up with the 100 door into sustainability?
Oh yeah, that's Jim Hartsfeld.
Hartsfeld.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Jim
used to
is
work a lot with
wonderful.
Interface in London because they were based here. So yeah, I did a lot
Yeah,
of work with them back in the 2000s.
that's
But yeah,
great.
such a leading organization in this space, one of the big
Yes.
pioneers.
And Jim has a great TEDx talk too that you can Google and find on influencing
Oh,
and
fantastic.
how to get buy-in. So
Oh,
yeah,
good. Great,
relevant for
Megan.
this conversation. Yeah.
Very, very. That would
Hmm.
be fantastic. Yeah. Great. Well, maybe you need to do your TED Talk now. I think you've got a lot of content here you can play with. No pressure. All
Sure.
right, well, let's open it up to questions from the audience. Just conscious of time. Nina, do you want to go first? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Finally, I wanted to hear more about, I think at the top of the call, you were talking about how you invested time in governance and getting a good governance foundation established so that you could have the right framework for approaching the impact work. What advice do you have for those of us who are still at that stage? Because sometimes the buy-in that we need is the buy-in to get a governance program, and it becomes a bit of a chicken and egg.
Mm.
And you don't have that foundation.
Yeah, great question, Nina. Thank you. So one of the things, anytime we want to make a change, the first thing that we do is benchmark against our competitors. And so this is no different with setting up our governance structure. We looked at our competitors' governance structures. We look to see, do they have a board committee that's focused on sustainability, ESG? Do they have a senior leadership governance committee internally? And so a lot of times we will model off of what our competitors are doing, and it helps to get the yes much more quickly if we can say, like, look at what our biggest competitors are doing. We want to be in line, right? Because that's best practice. We want to at least be keeping pace there. So two of the biggest changes that have been influential for me that we've made are we renamed our governance, nominating and governance committee to our governance and sustainability committee of the board. So that committee now has formal oversight of ESG. And like I said, I report to them each quarter. And then we revamped our internal ESG governance committee, which was a vice president level committee. And we took that up to the senior leadership level. So that's now our CEO and his leadership team with about 4 or 5 other select senior leaders across the business. And I meet with them every other month. So I am meeting with them 6 times per year, both, and this is also really helpful because I preview things that I want to share with the board, with the leadership team. So they don't necessarily know that I'm doing that, but I am doing that so that I can get their questions, see what doesn't make sense to them, and make tweaks to it before I bring it to the board. And our CEO also sits in those board committee meetings, so he also is seeing it twice. Again, it's just like he's like hearing the questions from the board members then on things that he's already heard, and he's hearing it again and again. So a lot of this is just like repetitive communication and anticipating questions, making things really clear, not getting too into the weeds. But that governance structure has really been helpful.
Yeah, really interesting. All right, and moving on to Lindsay.
Sure, thank you. Hi, Megan. You were talking about having conversations with the leadership team about risk and then wanting to know what's a real risk, what's a potential risk, and what's the potential magnitude. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more detail on how you quantify those risks, how you talk about that.
Yeah, this is still in the works for sure. So we've not had the ability to put a financial dollar figure on a lot of these risks unless it's a regulatory related risk that's going to impact a specific product category, for example, like we've got the new EU deforestation regulation that impacts specific products that we sell into Europe. And so if we are not able to comply with that and we potentially have product that can't get into Europe, we can obviously quantify the impact there from a revenue perspective. But for many of these other regulations, it's really difficult to quantify the impact. So we're working on that, trying to think through like how do we in the sort of the most accurate way possible, even though we're estimating, quantify. I will say on the climate side, we are undergoing our very first quantitative climate risk assessment. So obviously we're doing that in order to put potential financial dollar figures in front of the leadership team around some of these climate related impacts to our business so that we can get further buy-in from mitigation.
Great. Thanks, Megan.
Love that. All right, over to Heather. I think we'll take one or two more. Heather Unger.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think this has probably been on a lot of people's minds of just the impending ESG regulatory storm and getting ready for all of the regulations. And you talked about needing to influence, and we're working with teams across the organization. And how do you prepare for all of the additional disclosure requirements without it seeming like a burden? And how are you getting the teams to see like the value of going through this exercise of doing things that we didn't have to do in the past, and not just, this is additional work for us to do?
I don't know that I have the perfect answer for that because it is additional work that we have to do. And it's hard and it's really time consuming, especially when we would really love to be spending time on the things that are going to make an environmental impact. But I think that what we've tried to do is create small cross-functional teams for the regulations that we are in scope for that are like the most urgent. So like I mentioned, EU deforestation regulation, which it comes into play in December of this year, is right around the corner. We have a cross-functional team that meets every other week on that. And so we all have like tasks that we're working on and we all come together every 2 weeks on progress. We've got a small cross-functional team that was working on the carbon border adjustment mechanism out of EU. So I think that's how we've been approaching it, just these like sort of small teams with the right people, so that we are kind of reducing the burden on any one team. There are larger regulations like CSRD, which we are honestly still wrapping our arms around. So we're just getting into our double materiality assessment now, which will require a very large cross-functional collaboration. And we're asking the same folks to engage in our climate risk assessment. We're asking many of the same folks to engage in our ESG reporting interview process. So like a lot of these folks get tapped from multiple things from us, and we're really cognizant of that. And I don't see a good way around it right now, except to just show them why it's important. To show them that, we have to be able to meet these regulations in order to continue to deliver our products to the patients who need them, where they need them, when they need them. And just really framing it in terms of, we help improve the lives of people every single day. Our products do. And so if we are not able to bring our products to those hospitals or to those pharmacies, it's really going to impact the healthcare supply chain. So really just trying to put it in those terms. But again, day to day, it can be difficult, Heather, I'm not going to lie, because we ask a lot of them.
Yeah, I think this is a big challenge for everybody right now, isn't it? Just in terms of the pressure points around the reporting and the data.
Yeah. Great.
Well, before we do our closing, Megan, do you want to just give us your final word of wisdom, maybe summarizing, sending us all back out into our day jobs? Anything you want to leave us with?
Oh, goodness. Well, first of all, thank you for the active engagement. I have so enjoyed this, and I hope that it was useful. I would say that, one of the things that I've learned is that don't have preconceived notions about people. I think that there have been folks who have advised around certain people on a leadership team or certain people on a board and made assumptions about them based on who they appear to be, indicating that it would be hard for me to convert them over to the ESG side. And I would say don't have those preconceived notions. Just treat everybody like they have the ability to understand why this is important. And the more you can tie that to the business, the easier that's going to be for them to see the linkage. But I have been so pleasantly surprised to see the level of engagement, like I said, from Cardinal Health's leadership team and our board of directors. And I think that everybody wants to do good, but they want to do it in a way that makes sense for the business, of course. And I think if you can show them that, then, it's a win-win for everybody.
Great summary. Love that. A big thank you to you, Megan, for taking the time today. You've got such a wealth of knowledge, and just thank you again to all your really insightful questions and engagement, and to Megan for sharing your time with us all today. So hope to see you all soon.